Maureen, thank you so much for doing this and for joining me. It is really an honor. I have been watching your videos on TikTok and like I've just been like, oh my goodness, because I remember actually I was just looking at a post of yours. I think an introduction. You did a self-introduction and you were like, oh my God, I had like 100 followers not so long ago. And before you knew it, you did one video and everyone else just wanted to see what you were about.
Yeah.
I think your video was really great because a lot of us actually have endured racism and no one actually talks about it. And I think I also remember you talking about why you should be silenced because you've been abused for so long and finally you spoke and so many people responded. I mean, it was that video that got me to follow
Yeah.
you in the first place. Thank you so much for
Yeah.
that video, by the way, and thank you for
Oh,
being here.
thank you for having me. I'm honestly honored that you want to have me on your YouTube, and I'm so glad that we're having a conversation that is not often spoken about, that people don't have in our cultures. So thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Okay, let's get right into it. Please just let me know or let us know who Maureen is. We would really love to know this wonderful woman that we see on TikTok.
Well, I am, gosh, so yeah, Maureen, I'm a mom of three, and that has really become part of my identity in the last 6 years, because I just love my boys, and they have brought so much joy and healing in my life. And actually, if it wasn't for my kids, I don't think I would have ever started standing up for myself. So yeah, so I am first and foremost a mother. I'm a follower of Jesus, like through and through. I love Jesus. I understand that Christianity has done a lot of harm, even to myself. But I still love Jesus. He's still pretty cool. I was born in Kenya, um, and I moved to Ireland, to Dublin, when I was 12 years old. So I have a great memory of Kenya. And I dated somebody in Kenya for years, and I used to go and visit my granny for years. So I'm still very connected to my roots, even though kind of in between um leaving Kenya and now, I went through a phase of kind of being embarrassed of, my Kenyanness, and I guess we'll get into that later. But right now, I'm very connected to who I am as a Black woman, as a Kenyan woman, and yeah, I'm a wife to Tim Hamblin, and that's a whole story for for another day. But
Yeah.
I can safely say that we're happily married now. We went through a few years of like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this is what marriage is. But now, we're quite enjoying it. So that's a bit of who I am. Yeah.
Great. You know what I
Yeah.
love about you, Maureen, is the fact that like you are so open to talk about like the struggles that even happen in your marriage. And I think that is one of the reasons why I wanted to do this video because like I feel like you're so open to talk about things. Like when I see your videos on TikTok, I'm like, oh my goodness. Like
Yeah.
I saw a video of you talking about why you did not get divorced, and like you don't shy away from the fact that, well, you could have, but you have reasons why you stayed. You get what I mean? And I think I'm
Yeah.
just so glad that we're doing this video because of that type of person you are. It's refreshing. You're able to talk about things and like you're not ashamed to say, well, I go through this, I have this struggle. And that is a beautiful thing to watch, really. And I think another thing that you've spoken about is your family in Kenya. Please just talk to me a bit about your family of origin. I know that's how you call them, your family of
Yes.
origin.
Yeah. Oh goodness. So um oh it's still quite a sensitive topic for me, even though I'm like, okay, I'm still gonna share it. It's part of me living authentically, right? And shaping the future for my kids and and for other people. And yeah, so when I talk about my family of origin, it's the family that I grew up in. I grew up with my grandparents, my grandmother mostly, um, because my mom was away working, and I never met my dad. So a lot of my attachment would have been with my grandmother. She would have been the person that I kind of got to attach to. But you have to remember she had 9 children, and um, she was also a product of kind of the era of like children raising children because they had so many children. So I was raised by, aunts-in-law and cousins, and we all just looked after each other. Um, so there's a lot of unhealthy family dynamics in my family of origin. And I believe it's not just mine, in quite a lot of families. And I ended up, as a result, marrying into a family that had very, very similar toxic family dynamics like mine, because trauma marries into trauma, right?
Yeah.
Because that's familiar to you, you're drawn to that. The only difference was that they were a whole, completely different race. Um, but yeah, in my family, there's a lot of like generational trauma and there's a lot of secrecy. So people don't talk about depression. You don't really like a lot of my uncles would have drunk a lot when I was growing up, and that wasn't called alcoholism. Do you know what I mean? And it was always kind
Yeah.
of hidden.
Mhm.
And then they would once in a while get baptized, they would find Jesus, and then a few weeks later, they were back at it. And now I know as a compulsive eater, as a food addict, I understand that addiction is an illness. But I grew up seeing a lot of addiction, seeing a lot of and a lot of secrecy. So you were always kind of like, you never hang your family's dirty laundry because people are gonna, otherwise people are gonna like know the truth
Yeah.
about who we are.
Yeah.
And surrounding that is a lot of shame. So if there's a lot of secrecy, there's a lot of shame, there's a lot of guilt. And as a child, I couldn't separate the shame, my family's shame, with my shame, because children are not able to. We generally take on what our family is doing. And so you take that on. And so I still would struggle with a lot of shame. And actually, with every video that I put up on TikTok, I need about an hour or two to just kind of decompress and to kind of be
Wow.
like, okay, we've shared that. And sometimes I have to write down the benefits of sharing what I've shared, right? Um, and because there was always a lot of shame whenever I spoke up. If I spoke up with my granny, if I spoke up with my mom later on when I went to live with her, there was always like, how can you talk like that? You shouldn't, and just a lot of like, and then if you add those dynamics in my family, and then you add culture, and culture is what we make it to be, but
That's
we want to die on that hill of culture, right?
that
A
is
lot of
so
us are just like, it's
true.
my culture, and like, okay, somebody made that culture, and
That
we
is
can remake a new
true.
one,
Culture
right?
was made
Um,
by people. Yeah.
yeah, but we think that just because our great grandmother did it, that we have to do it. So if you add a toxic family dynamic and add culture and the toxic elements of culture, and in my culture, it's a culture of sexism. The woman is almost like a second class citizen, even though Kenyan women and Kikuyu women work hard. They hold it down when
Mm,
their husband are mostly addicted to stuff and whatever. Like they just work hard. So there's that sexism. There's almost like internalized racism where the white man is better, until that white man is not doing what like like me marrying a white guy was like such a big deal, because marrying white is better. But then our lives have taken a completely different route to what was expected.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
now, I hear statements like, actually, just before my grandmother died, she said something along the lines of, you know, who told you to marry a white guy?
really.
Yeah, and that broke
Yeah,
my heart because I thought she was my one of my few kind of allies in me
yeah,
choosing to marry Tim. So stuff like that. So if you mix toxic family environment with toxic culture, and a culture of like dowry, making money off of the girls, and
yeah,
then you add toxic Christianity, like super right-wing Christianity, where the Bible is read as without any context. It's read without any um as if God dictated every word. So the Bible is not dictated by God, it's inspired, and there's a difference. But people want to say, like I remember when I was complaining about my dowry, and family members were like, well, dowry is in the Bible, so we have to do it. And to me, it's like, yes, it's in the Bible. It doesn't mean that, it needs to be
yeah.
practiced,
It was,
right? And I know,
yeah, it
yeah,
was the culture then.
yeah,
Yeah,
things like that. Or I know some people who support polygamy because it's in the Bible. And it's interesting, actually, this morning I was preaching for a church in England, and um, I was preaching the story of Bathsheba and David, and
yeah.
actually in Deuteronomy 17:17, sorry to make this too religious, I'm sorry.
No, no
God had said
worries,
that
no
a
worries.
king, okay, God had said that a king should be a husband of one wife. They were not allowed to have more than one wife. And yet, none of the kings in Israel, and I could be wrong, but let me just say 99% of them all had more than one wife. And David had about six wives and then so many concubines. And he had five wives when he takes Bathsheba, somebody else's wife. And that's all in the Bible. And yet some people want to use that to say that polygamy is okay, even though the polygamy and him taking Bathsheba and literally raping her um,
Uh,
leads to the rape of his daughter Tamar by her own brother. And David doesn't do anything. He doesn't do anything to defend Tamar's honor. And, so I just want to say that just because something is in the Bible, it doesn't mean that it's right. It doesn't mean that you have to do that. And a lot of it is just God showing his grace and mercy with the people that we think are heroes of the faith, right? Like David is called a person after God's heart. And yet he messed up so bad. And it shows us that there's grace for me. If there's grace for David, there's grace for me. But it also shows us how not to walk. And so, yeah, anyway, so my family dynamic, my family of origin is like really toxic, a lot of narcissistic personalities in there. Possibly borderline personality disorder. None of them have ever, because mental health, you cannot go to counseling or therapy because
yeah,
because it's not from God. And
yeah.
yeah, so that's my family dynamic. Lots of kind of mental health issues that nobody talks about, nobody is aware of. And then you mix in the toxic culture and you mix in the toxic Christianity, and it is lethal. It is
Oh,
damaging. So I've managed to kind of mostly, almost fully, there are a few people that I'm still in touch with, but I've chosen um, to kind of orphan myself, sadly, because I couldn't heal in that place. So yeah, and I don't know what the question was.
you actually answered the question.
Okay.
Oh wow. That just sounds really heavy though, but and also you left home while you were still very young, right? You left home for Northern Ireland when you were 12, you said, yeah?
So I left Kenya when I was 12 to Dublin, to the Republic of Ireland first.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah, and I went to live with my mom and my stepdad. They had moved there. Yeah,
oh yeah.
yeah.
I something else that you actually touched on was the fact that you asked your mom when you were 10 years old about your dad. How was that
Mhm.
conversation?
like it was a hard conversation. It took everything from me as a 10-year-old.
Yeah.
Like my eldest son is 6, right? And I know in 4 years a lot is going to happen. But I can't imagine him trying to kind of put together all of his courage to speak to me about something like that. I
Yeah.
would I would never let it get to that point. So for example, the fact that I kind of detached from my family and from Tim's family, we've had that conversation with our kids already in a way that kids would understand, right?
Yeah.
Because I don't need to lie to them or just kind of completely ignore the fact that these people were in my kids' lives as well.
Yeah.
Um, anyway, but I had never met my dad, so so yeah, working up the courage to talk to my mom, and I just remember sitting there falling asleep. My granny had a kitchen outside of the main house. It was made out of mud, and so we're all sitting there, and I kept just thinking, like, why won't people go to sleep? And it's funny because at 10 years old, I should have been in bed, like
Yeah.
my kids go to bed early, like 6, 7 p.m. max, right? Because they need it.
Yeah.
They need at least, they need all that. But it just shows you the dynamics in these, in some families. And so I stayed up and nobody knew why. But I kept thinking, okay, if more people leave, then it'll just be me and my mom, and then I'll be able to ask her.
Yeah.
But one of my cousins, and my granny would not go to bed. So it was just me, my mom, my granny, and my cousin, and I think maybe one other person. And I just said, okay, I don't think these people are ever going to go to sleep. Let me just ask. So I said, Mom, can I ask you a question? And you have to remember that I hadn't lived with her at all at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she was this pretty woman that I used to see here and there,
Yeah.
sometimes once, maybe twice a year. Never saw her more than that.
Yeah.
And so so she's practically a stranger to me. So I asked her, I said something along the lines, can I ask you something? And she was like, yeah. And I said, well, Shosho's granny. I was like, she keeps saying that I'm gonna get a new dad, and other people keep saying that, but I just want to know, like, what happened to my old dad? And the look on her face, like you could just see how inconvenient this was, and like you could hear a pin drop. This was like an uncemented kitchen, right? It was like made out of dirt, but I'm pretty sure if you dropped a pin, you could have heard it. My
Yeah.
cousin is sitting there. He's a few years older than me. Um, my granny, like everybody's just kind of like, because in my culture, maybe it's different now, but in those days, nobody really told their kids about about their dads in my
Yeah.
as but yeah, so you just kind of, once you left him, that was it. There was no, so I was, I guess, a bit of a pioneer without knowing. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so she was like, well, I left him when you were little. And I said, oh, okay, so that gave me hope. I was like, okay, I do have one, because I think when you're a child you can be really naive, and I think a part of me thought maybe I never had a dad, because at that point I didn't know how children are made, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
um so I was like, oh, so I do have a dad. And then she was like, yeah, but he died the year I wanted you to meet him. And that just broke my heart. But the funny thing is, I didn't cry. I didn't cry. I just said, oh, okay, well, that's good. And I just thought maybe it's for the best. Um, and I started to try and get excited about the wedding. And but the next day, my mom just really was like upset with me. She says she wasn't, because I tried to talk to her about it years, later. And
Yeah.
but um she was upset with me. Like my hair, I had a huge afro, and they had put these roll like newspaper rollers in my hair. Um and I didn't like the way it was. So I went to my mom for her to help me, and she just yelled at me. And literally that her wedding day was like the worst day of my life, because I think for the first time I started to realize that I actually don't belong. I don't belong with my mom. I don't really belong with my granny, because now I was in boarding school already. I don't know if you've seen
Mm,
those videos. So I had actually come home at my granny's for the wedding from the boarding school.
yeah,
So
yeah.
for the first time, I not the first time, I felt the feeling of isolation and loneliness, as young as like 5. But I think it was overwhelmingly more isolated that day, especially when I saw the flower girls take pictures with the bride and the page boys, and she drove, they were all in her car, and I was in a different car, and stuff like that. But I did, obviously now I'm speaking in hindsight with, a 34-year-old brain.
Yeah.
Um, but I just remember just the day was off. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put a finger on it.
Mm.
But now I look back and I'm like, it's because I felt isolated, I felt lonely. Um, I didn't have a place to belong, and I think I just knew that but yeah, I went back to school and I changed my name. I started writing my stepdad's surname. That's that's how
Wow.
desperate I was, because I think I thought fake it till you make it. I was like,
Yeah,
okay, let me
yeah.
own this. So I went from Maureen Shaged to Maureen Gatharia, and I would have an issue with names up until recently. Now I'm like, okay, what's to a name? But for a long time, names were very sensitive for me.
Yeah.
But yeah, that it was a weird conversation. And later on in 2011, I did ask my mom. Um, I said I'd like to meet my dad's family, and she arranged for that to happen. But the thing is, right, it's difficult. Like, I take people's words as gold. Well, I used to believe people's words. So when I asked her, and she was like, yeah, yeah, I'll plan it for you. I really thought she was just like excited for me. She's like,
Yeah.
um, but then my family, her sisters, and my granny had a problem with it. So I went and I met the family, but then I heard comments like, after all we've done for you, why would you want to see those people and blah blah blah. And like I was like, so anyway, my relationship with my mom is very strained, and I realize it's never been what I really perceived it to be. um but yeah, so yeah, so I
Wow.
yeah.
Wow. Funny actually, as you were talking about your mom, I was going to ask you, so how's your relationship with your mom now? And you literally just answered that right now. But one of the videos that I think that really led me to asking you if you would be part of this video was the video where everyone asked you, like, why didn't you divorce your husband since he did not stand up for you when you were dealing with the racism in his family and your father-in-law just being so racist to you. And I think what I and you said this, I wrote it down in the video. You said that you did not grow up with your mom and you never knew your dad, so you
Mhm,
never thought that you were worth someone standing up for you.
mhm. Yeah.
And like when you said that, I was like, ooh, like, oh my God, like, wow, so please talk to me more about that. Like,
Yeah,
give me
I
more.
yeah, I feel yeah, I and I've come a long way from thinking like that. I still struggle. I think the thing about childhood trauma, and because it's a wound where when we experience when we experience things like neglect and abandonment and abuse, whatever, sexual abuse, whatever, these toxic dynamics when we're growing up, um, a wound happens to our thinking. And there's a guy I follow on YouTube, and he's a therapist, Patrick Tehan, and he talks about the childhood trauma wound being one of perception and identity. So when somebody leaves you, when your mother leaves you, um, so I was reading, oh God, I have so much to say. So the Oprah has a book with Dr. Perry, and Dr. Perry is kind of like, works in childhood trauma. And he talks about how the first 2 months of life are so crucial. And so the first 2 months, if a child gets the care that they need, if they get the consistent love, the consistent affection, they're looked after, their nappies are changed, they're fed consistently, and they're shown that they're loved and wanted, they become more resilient later on. So let's say if they get 2 really good months, the first few months, 2 months really good, and then they come across trauma later on in life, for like 10 years, they would still be more resilient than a child who has a few really rough first few months of life.
Wow.
And then goes through like a year of trauma. So I was an unwanted child. My mom and my dad did what they did, found out they were pregnant, and she didn't want me. She's told me that her sister tried to get her to have an abortion, but they were Catholics, the family were Catholic, so she stuck it out. But it's clear now it's clear that I was an unwanted child by him and by her. And children, even in the womb, internalize that. So if you grow up knowing that you were not wanted, then you take the little breadcrumbs, whatever little somebody gives to you, you take it. And then I often believe that, I had to do everything by myself, right? Like literally anything by myself. My granny, like, she did provide for me in terms of like food and school and whatever, but she wasn't emotionally mature enough to like meet my other needs. So I grew up just believing that I was on my own in this world and I just had to kind of do it. And so when my in-laws were being really awful to me, I did ask my husband to stand up for me. And he always said yes, he would, but then he didn't. But I didn't feel that, I don't want to say that he was wrong, that he wasn't wrong, because I knew he was wrong. Otherwise, I wouldn't have asked him. But I think I was so used to always fighting my own battles or letting people just, you know, do what do whatever they wanted, that I didn't think. I just didn't think. I just thought I just have to get on with it. Especially because I did try to talk to my mom about it, and other people, church people. I tried to talk to this older woman about it, and they were just like, just stick it out. That's what marriage is about. So I just thought, so yeah, there was a lot of feelings of just not good enough, not good enough. So I didn't have the Patrick Tehan, that therapy talks a lot about helping you feel all your emotions so that you feel even the worst emotions like disgust, right? When you're disgusted at how somebody treats you, then you can leave, then you can stand up for yourself. And that's why a lot of people in domestic violence situations don't leave, because a lot of us, a lot of people don't feel good enough. So with my in-laws, it was wrong, but it wasn't disgusting. It wasn't until I got to the point where I was like, and I had to do
Yeah.
all my inner healing work. I had to heal, do a lot of healing, a lot of kind of meditation, a lot of like, I'm good enough, I'm lovable, I'm all of this.
Yeah.
Um, to be like, wait, he said what? Like, I surprise myself now when I remember something that my in-laws have said. I think to myself, I can't believe I let them get away with that, you know,
Yeah.
because now I've healed. Now I have the emotions. I feel all the emotions to allow me to be like, no, that is disgusting. You're not supposed to treat me like that. I am worth so much more than that. And it's the same with
Yeah.
my family of origin. I put up with so much. And it's the same with my mom. I put up with so much. I gave her everything. Literally, there's nothing I can give to my mother. I gave her everything. I put up with so much, and then I got to a point where I was like, no, this woman throw. I haven't shared a lot about my mom yet, but um, like later on in life,
Yeah.
but I got to a point where I thought this woman throws me under the bus anytime she gets. I'm not a priority in her life. I never was. And every time I interact with her, my heart breaks and it sends me back like it's like I've been making progress and then I have a week with not even a week, 2 days with my mom, and I'm back to like you know feeling
Oh,
like I'm not good enough. And that's what happened last year actually, to kind of get me to be like, no, she was here for 2 days, and then after she left, it took me weeks to pick myself up off the floor.
yeah.
And at the time, I was seeing this amazing therapist, and she helped me. She really kind of, helped me. She did EMDR, and if you haven't heard of EMDR, it's just great. It's basically revisiting a memory, but connecting with your body. So you're connecting with your body while remembering, so that you can become you're able to deal with those memories better,
Yeah.
rather than those memories kind of making you, because what would happen was, like, when I interacted with my mom or my in-laws, like sometimes I'd be in bed for days. All I'd want to do is, like, all I'd have the strength to do is look after my kids. So I'd feed my kids,
Yeah.
um, and whatever, just do the bare minimum. But I had no energy to do anything else. And yeah, so getting to that point where you feel all your feelings and you decide enough is enough. I'm worthy. I'm lovable. You didn't think that I was, but I am. And that has come from God as well. Definitely. I live in Ephesians chapter 1 and 2. And that, yeah. So,
Wow, that is wow. Just when you were talking about like your healing, right? One of
yeah.
the things that just comes to my mind is I'm trying to I'm trying to think about how it might have been when your husband finally started standing up for you, because for so long you did not think that you were worth standing up for, for so
Mm-hmm.
long you thought, you were not worth fighting for. And finally, your husband is talking to his family and he's like, no, do not talk to her like that. And
Mm-hmm.
no, now we are going to distance ourselves because, you keep hurting my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And you've never had a dad to do that for you. How's
Yeah.
that feeling? How is just looking at your husband fighting for you?
Um, like, it's bitter sometimes, because I'm like, what took you so long?
Yeah.
But it is beautiful. It is beautiful. And I remember the day when I cut off his parents, when I sent a message to his mom, and I was shaken, literally shaken. And he had gone to bed early that night. And so I was like, I need to wake him up. I texted my friend in America, and I was like, I've just done this, and she was like, okay, make sure you talk to Tim first before, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm like shaking. Not that Tim would ever do anything. He never even raises his voice. He's like super laid back. Um, and I woke him up, and I was like, you know, this is what I did. And he was like, yeah, I knew that was coming. So he wasn't mad at me at all. And I spent the next week or so being like, so are you mad at me? Are you okay? He's like, no, no. He was like, I knew that was gonna probably be, the thing that was gonna, happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it does. It feels good that he chose me and he chose to stand with me and our kids, and yeah, it does feel good to have someone in my corner. And you know what? Sometimes it does feel like him and my boys are like the only people I have in the world. Like, on a bad day, sometimes I feel like I have nobody, but like I have them, and I thank God for them every day, like every day. And I'm glad that by me healing, he also found his healing, and he still has a long way to go, and because
Yeah.
he hasn't been to therapy or anything like that, but he is doing some of the work, and hopefully we'll just keep healing together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Would you say that at some point you were hoping for like a father relationship from your in-law, from your
Girl,
dad-in-law?
girl. Yes. Are you a therapist? I,
No.
so let me tell you the story about when I realized that that's what I wanted. So I'm in America. My in-laws are like, we're coming in a few weeks. They used to just book flights and just come
Yeah.
for like 5, 6 weeks. Like what? Um, so I can't remember if I was pregnant. I don't think I was pregnant. I think my son was born. Oh, I can't remember. At some point, I'm either pregnant or hormonal from breastfeeding, something. So my life, I start to spiral. I'm like, these people are coming, um, and I don't feel really good about it. So I went to see the seminary therapist, and he was a South African man, actually, a white South African man. He was so gentle, so loving, and so I'm telling him the whole thing, and I'm telling him some of the things that they've said and some of the things that they do. And he said to me, you seem very hurt by your father-in-law. And he was like, why do you think that is? And I sat there for like 5 minutes. I was like, why does it bother me so much? And I said, I guess maybe I had hoped that finally I would have like a father who was invested in me. And I started crying. I was just like,
Oh,
but yeah, I had that epiphany. I had really, really hoped that my father-in-law would, because my stepdad
yeah.
was there, but he wasn't there. And he was like that with his other kids, with his real kids. Um, but yeah, he kind of wasn't there. So I think a part of me had thought, finally, somebody.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good question. If you're not a therapist, you need to be a therapist.
Oh my goodness. Wow. There's an article that I read just in preparation for this that,
Yeah,
just talks about how then a child that grows up in a fatherless home kind of like experiences trauma throughout life, and
yeah,
I actually just thinking about something that you said, I think even on this video, but I also saw it on your TikTok where you said that um, someone that gets born into trauma also,
hmm
lives through trauma and marries
hmm
into trauma. But what I want to know based on that about you, because you say it that I was born into trauma and I got married into trauma. How
hmm
important is it for you to kind of like shield your boys from like just childhood trauma?
yeah. And that's part of the reason why I've done a cutoff. And this morning at 6 a.m., as I was making pancakes for the boys, my eldest boy came down And I can't remember what he said. And I said, you and your brothers are like the best thing that ever happened to me. And he was like, is that true, Mama? And I was like, yeah. And he was like, what do you mean by that? And I told him, until before they came, I didn't, I said I didn't stand up to people who were not being very nice.
Mm.
And it was and actually until I got pregnant with my son, I had still idealized my mom, right? So my mom was always this beautiful woman that I saw
Yeah.
here and there, and then I went to live with her, and that wasn't great. But I still idealized her. She was still, and when I got pregnant and I was trying to get her, this is exclusive, by the way, I haven't even shared it on TikTok. Um, and I was like, oh, my baby's due on, I think he was supposed to be born on the 8th of May, 2016. Um, so this is 2015, right? So you have 9 months. So I'm like, book your flight, come, come, come,
Yeah.
And she was hesitant. She didn't want to come. And I kept trying. And my cousins, this is, you know, I it's interesting. I have so many cousins and different relationship dynamics. But my cousins came together, the ones in Ireland, shipped, put money together for my mom to come, and she said no. And then my in-laws also offered, they said, it's important for you to be with your mom, those first few weeks. We're willing to pay for your mom to come. And my mom never came.
Wow.
Yeah, and so me saying that to my son this morning, that was the beginning of wow, like my son wasn't born yet, and yet I would fly anywhere for him.
Yeah.
And yet this woman refused to come. And my sisters were like 16 and maybe 10 at the time or something like that. And
Yeah.
my granddad lived 10 minutes from them in England. And my mom was like, I can't leave my children to come. And I said, Mom, it would only be for a week or two. Like, I'm not expecting you to come for months.
Yeah.
And 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 it hadn't quite clicked. And I thought, but she left me for 12 years and she can't leave her other kids for 2 weeks.
Oh, yeah.
So that was like the beginning of like my life unraveling. I was just like, and then with my in-laws, then when they came to visit 6 weeks after my son was born, and they started to, my father-in-law said that baby looks too Kenyan. That's when I was like, oh, like, this man really is racist. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's when I
Yeah.
started to be like, okay, I need to talk to these people. I need to talk to my mom. And I did actually that Christmas. I tried to talk to my mom, tried to talk to my in-laws. It went horribly wrong.
Yeah.
And I was blamed by both people. And it's funny, I'm the scapegoat. I was the scapegoated child. I don't know if people are aware of, like, in narcissistic families, you always have to have a good child and a bad child, or
Uh,
sometimes the roles change. So I was mostly scapegoated, but I was also the good child because I was academic and I loved church. And so, but mostly anything that went wrong, so it's funny that in my family of origin, I was the scapegoated child, but I was also the scapegoated child in my in-laws' family, and
yeah.
I married their scapegoat. So I
Wow.
married the person with the same exact role as I did. And you
Mm,
know what? A part of me is grateful for that I married the scapegoat rather than the golden child, because the golden child cannot see their parents' wrongdoing.
yes, that is so true.
So yeah, so these are the people that you'll talk to them about what their parents have done to you, and they'll just be like, just stick it out, just, but they're my
See it
parents
from
or
their
whatever.
point of view.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, in this case, my husband's sister is, and it still is the golden child. And actually, even before. we distanced ourselves from the family. She had already taken a side, and I'm not surprised. But yeah, so I'm glad because Tim, even though he didn't stand up to them initially, we always had a good rant about them. We always talked about, how
Yeah.
wrong it is and how
Mhm.
one day we're gonna get it together, we're gonna talk to them, and you know,
Yeah.
so yeah, talking about being born into trauma and marrying into trauma, I would actually, for anybody watching today, I would say, even if you haven't grown up in like as much trauma as I have, go to therapy before you even start dating or before you get married.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
work on your stuff, because if you work on your stuff, you'll know your value, you'll know your worth, you'll know your humanness as well, right?
Mhm.
And you'll be able to pick people not because it's familiar to you, but because they're good for you. So for me, it was almost like the the people I dated, oh my goodness, like I dated some horrific people again because I didn't think I was worth much.
Mm.
And one of them that took a long time, actually, even in my marriage, I would still often think about him, even though now that I've done my work, I'm like, he abused me. And
So.
yet I was the most trauma bonded to him. So, and my husband knows all of this. This is not, and I've shared a bit on my YouTube about it. So, um, what I want to say is that because I didn't think I was worth much, I settled. I just thought, oh, well, this person calls me here and there. And, they don't really take me on dates, but at least they want to sleep with me, or, stuff like that, where I just thought I just got the bare minimum. The bare minimum, and I was okay with it because I didn't know my worth. But I would say, get therapy early before you get married. Um, before you're even dating, if you're able to watch YouTube, that's the great thing about YouTube now. Find good therapists on YouTube, watch their stuff, do their journaling prompts, and that will help you not marry into trauma. I love my husband, and I think, knowing what I know, I probably would still marry, go, like if we were to go back, I probably would still marry him, just because we've gone through so much and we have such beautiful kids. But a part of me, does wonder, would I have chosen differently, or would we have set good boundaries very early in our marriage
Oh
to
yeah.
save us from 11 years of the abuse that we got from his family. But definitely my kids coming into my life showed me how I was parented in the wrong way,
Mm, mm,
and how I wanted to change that.
mm.
And me cutting off my in-laws last year and cutting off my mom this year was part of that. I don't, if I'm not safe in these people's presence, then how much unsafe are my children? And they're vulnerable, right? And
Yeah,
children take on everything.
that is
And if,
true. Yeah.
yeah, and if I'm constantly triggered, then I'm not able to be a good mom, right? If I spend a
Yeah.
day with you, like I would spend like an afternoon with my in-laws, and it would take me from Tuesday to like Friday, Saturday to come out of that fog of,
Yeah.
you know, of the abuse. And yeah, so like it's important, not because, I think sometimes people think, oh, people are just cutting off people these days, people have no respect for parents or family. But if it means that I get to change the trajectory of my children's future, if my children get to grow up with like way less trauma than I did, then I'm gonna do it. I do it for them. It's the same as I left my church of origin as well. And after a pastor was preaching about how children um being on the pulpit was blasphemous, and right, I was just like, and he was calling the furniture holy, and I was just like, I, 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 so I made that choice. Me and Tim made that choice. We were just like, it was a accumulation. If you want the whole story, go on my TikTok. But I don't want my children growing up with a messed up image of God.
Yeah.
I don't want them to grow up with a messed up image of themselves and a messed up image of relationships. So that's why I've done the cutoff for the next generation. And hopefully their children will also, they'll be able to kind of keep growing, keep healing, and, and we'll get rid of the generational trauma.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And I think this is going to be my last question.
Okay.
You also speak about, how your hair is wonderful and really beautiful, by the way.
Thank
But
you.
I think in that very video of why you didn't divorce your husband, you also spoke about how, you told a story of how before you started dating him, you decided to grow your natural hair and you were so nervous telling him that, hey, this is not really my hair, it's extensions and all that. And he said to you, if I don't like your hair, that means I don't like you at all. And like just watching that video and seeing the smile on your face when you tell the story. I was like,
Oh,
oh my God. And I wanna ask, like, would you say that that acceptance, like just having been rejected all your life, that acceptance, especially also because you dated someone who was African who was not for your hair at all,
yeah,
that moment of, oh my God, someone accepts me for who I am.
yeah,
Like, would you
yeah,
say that was just like a
yeah.
defining moment? I am marrying you.
Yeah. So actually the thing that made me think I'm gonna marry Tim was him. I think it was our because we were doing the whole long distance thing.
Yeah.
Um and one day I stayed, so he lived in a student accommodation, and I stayed the night to get the bus early in the morning to go straight to work in Dublin, and he brought me hot water. He knew because at those days that's when I used to run. I was like nice and fit, and I used to drink hot water like all the time to cleanse
Yeah.
myself. And he brought me hot water first thing in the morning, and I just thought,
Oh,
okay. But yes, definitely when he told me that about my hair, I remember like I didn't even process it at the time. Sometimes when somebody is very nice to me, it takes me a minute. So it wouldn't be for months. Like it would take me months to really kind of grasp what that meant. But I describe Tim as and our relationship actually, like I have so many complaints, but I also have such good things to say about him.
yeah.
But for me, it was almost like, when you come home and you lay, I have an amazing bed now. I'm not saying this to brag, but I had never owned a bed, like bought one myself until
Wow.
last year.
Wow.
So we bought this bed, it's super king and it's just super cozy. And now when I come home, I just love sometimes to just go upstairs and just lay there. And Tim, that feeling you feel when you're in your nice, cozy bed,
Yeah.
that's what my relationship with Tim has been like. Like if you just ignore everything else, um, that's what it's been like. And it was, after dating the guy in Kenya and a few other people that just were not for me, I was never good enough to date somebody that actually accepted me. I didn't need to change who I was. I didn't need to um pretend to be somebody else. I didn't like, I could wear my hair. I wore my hair when it was like this, and
Yeah.
he loved it.
Yeah.
I wore whatever I wanted. Like I remember the guy in Kenya used to be like, why can't you dress like the other girls? Because I love wearing dresses, right?
Yeah.
And he wanted me to like wear jeans and whatever. And I'm not against jeans. I wear jeans, trust me. Just look at my Facebook. But I feel more comfortable in dresses because they're cute and then they hide your middle area, depending on
Oh,
what kind of dress you're wearing.
yeah.
Yeah. So he used to always criticize me for that. But with Tim, I could literally wear whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, and there was no judgment. And it's the same now, even with TikTok, like I've literally exposed our family. Um, and he's okay with it because he's like, I know it's important for you. So yeah, everybody has aspects of themselves that they need to grow from. Tim accepting my hair meant a lot, and him accepting my personality. Because for a long time, I thought I was too loud, I was too needy, I was too emotional. Um, and he never criticized any of that stuff. And for me, it felt like, yeah, coming home to a really comfy bed and just being held in that bed, and like a safe place. And I hadn't had that with my parents. I hadn't had that with most of the adults in my life. And I hadn't had that while dating because I literally just dated people who were not good for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just to bring God into it, I really did fast and pray. Um, because actually before I got with Tim, my ex in Kenya wanted to get back together, and I was kind of torn because I was talking to both of them, and
Yeah.
I fasted and prayed, and I said, God, show me. And Tim and I dated for 2 years, and then we broke up for a bit. I went traveling, and then when I was away traveling, God was like, Tim is still the one. When I was fasting and praying when I was in Brazil. And I have no doubt now in this moment, I have had doubts, say even 4 years, that's what I wanted to say. 4 years ago when our marriage was going through a really rough time, I really struggled to believe that God had brought us together.
Yeah.
Um, but before that, I hadn't. I knew that this was from God. Like I had fasted, I had prayed, and God had brought me to Tim. And now, in this moment, I can safely say that I have no doubt that it was God. And it doesn't mean that the journey was gonna be easy, because clearly it hasn't, right? And we've had to move a lot, and we've had to deal with a lot from my family, his family, and but our love for each other is still there, and we've grown with each other. And yeah, he is, my safe person, probably one of the safest people for me on
Oh.
planet Earth. Yeah, and that was my waffle. That was me waffling.
No. Oh my goodness. I love it. Oh my word. Thank you, thank you, thank you. This brings us to like the end of it all, but Maureen, you are an incredible woman. I have to say, you
Oh,
are an incredible woman. You have been so gracious throughout this process, even when we got disconnected. And like,
oh,
this is so beautiful. I am so honored to get to know you and for talking to you. I believe I'm going to be texting you again for something else
yeah,
because I feel like there's so much I can get from you. Thank
yeah,
you so much. And you were saying that sorry for making this too religious, but you know what? Like, for everyone that has been on this series, actually, we've had just a talk about God and who we are in Him and all that. And just
yeah.
to wrap this up, I want to say that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. And I believe that all that you've gone through was preparing you for a time such as this, because so
Mm,
many young women out there need you and need your story, and just to be able to stand up for themselves, to be able to work through the trauma that they were born into. And you are chosen, you are loved, and you are accepted, and I am so grateful to have had a conversation with you. Thank
oh, thank you so much. Thank you for pouring into me. That means a lot. And thank you for having me.